Imagine two 5-year-olds sitting on a playground swing set, giggling as they promise to marry each other one day. It's one of those sweet, innocent pacts kids make, sealed with pinky fingers and big dreams. Fast forward 15 years, and what started as a playful promise is suddenly back on the table. Life has thrown them in different directions, new friends, unexpected family drama, and the whirlwind of growing up. But somehow, their childhood vow refuses to fade. As adults, they decide to give it a shot, not just for the sake of nostalgia, but to see if their connection was more than just playground make-believe. However, what seemed simple as kids quickly becomes a roller coaster. Balancing old expectations with the complexities of adulthood isn't easy, and the differences that were once overlooked now create moments of tension. Family opinions, personal goals, and unexpected truths rise to the surface, testing their commitment in ways they never imagined. But amidst the chaos, there's joy too, revisiting childhood memories, discovering new layers of each other, and realizing the beauty of second chances. The question is, will their bond be strong enough to overcome the challenges? Or will the pressures of reality prove that some promises are better left in the past? As their teenage years came to a close, life had already started tugging them in different directions. One of them was deeply immersed in academics, aiming for a career in medicine, while the other pursued a passion for art and creativity, dreaming of galleries and exhibitions. Their paths were distinct, their goals seemingly worlds apart. But the memory of that childhood pact lingered, tucked away in the corners of their minds. It wasn't until they crossed paths at a mutual friend's wedding that the topic resurfaced, completely out of the blue. At first, it was a joke, a nostalgic laugh over shared memories. "Remember when we promised to get married?" one said, grinning. The other replied with a playful roll of their eyes. "What were we thinking? We didn't even know how to tie our shoes properly back then." But behind the teasing was an unmistakable sense of curiosity. What if? That innocent question sparked something neither of them expected. They decided to meet up again, just as friends, to catch up on the years they'd missed. Those casual coffee dates soon became dinners, long walks, and late-night conversations about life, dreams, and everything in between. The connection was undeniable. Yet, as they grew closer, so did the weight of reality. Their families couldn't have been more different. One came from a household where tradition and cultural expectations dictated every major life decision, while the other grew up in a more liberal, laid-back environment. When word of their growing relationship spread, opinions started pouring in: unsolicited advice, warnings, and, in some cases, outright disapproval. One parent saw their bond as a reckless distraction, while the other questioned whether they truly understood the magnitude of what they were committing to. It wasn't just family that complicated things. As they spent more time together, the differences in their personalities became more pronounced. One preferred structure, planning every step of life meticulously, while the other thrived on spontaneity, embracing the unknown with open arms. What once felt like complementary traits began to clash. Arguments sparked over small things: how to spend weekends, where to eat, even which movies to watch. But those little disagreements often masked deeper fears. Were they trying too hard to force something that should have stayed in the past? Their friends weren't much help either. Some cheered them on, gushing over how romantic it was that they were giving their childhood promise a chance. Others, however, were skeptical. "You're chasing a fairy tale," one friend warned. "You were kids when you made that promise. It doesn't mean you're meant to be together now." Those words planted seeds of doubt that neither could ignore. Adding to the pressure, an unexpected opportunity arose that threatened to pull them even further apart. One of them received an offer to work abroad, an incredible career milestone, but one that came with a tough decision. Would they go, risking the fragile relationship they were just beginning to build? Or would they stay, potentially giving up a once-in-a-lifetime chance for something that still felt uncertain? As the weeks passed, the strain started to show. They found themselves questioning not just their relationship, but their own identities. Were they holding on to this promise out of genuine love? Or was it the nostalgia of simpler times that kept them tethered? Was their connection strong enough to withstand the realities of adulthood? Or were they chasing a dream that could never live up to the weight of their expectations? In the middle of all this, a surprising revelation came to light. While sifting through old childhood belongings, one of them stumbled upon a forgotten journal. Inside, there were detailed entries about their time together, as kids, the games they played, the dreams they shared, and even mentions of the Pact. But what stood out most was an entry written years after they'd drifted apart. It was raw and honest, filled with regret over losing touch and a longing to reconnect. That discovery reignited a spark, reminding them of what had initially brought them together. But it also brought new questions. If they were so important to each other back then, why had they let so much time pass without trying harder to stay in touch? And could they overcome that distance now? As the story unfolded, subplots began weaving their way into the bigger picture. One of their siblings, initially skeptical of their relationship, started facing their own romantic struggles, drawing unexpected parallels between their journeys. Meanwhile, a close friend of theirs became a voice of reason, challenging them to think critically about what they truly wanted, not just from each other, but from life itself. The tension reached a boiling point during a family dinner meant to bring everyone together. What started as an attempt to mend bridges quickly turned into a battleground of opinions. Harsh words were exchanged, feelings were hurt, and for a moment it felt like everything was falling apart. Yet, in the midst of the chaos, there was an undeniable truth. They cared deeply for each other. The question was, would that be enough? By now, they both felt like they were standing at a crossroads. Each decision they made seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 possibilities, and the stakes only grew higher. Would they fight to prove that their connection was worth the challenges? Or would they walk away, leaving the promise of their childhood as nothing more than a bittersweet memory? The answers weren't clear, and the uncertainty lingered like a cloud over every interaction. As they sat together one evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon, one of them finally voiced what they'd both been thinking. "I don't know if this will work, but I know I don't want to give up on us, not yet." The statement hung in the air, full of both hope and hesitation. The challenges ahead were undeniable, and the road to resolution was far from clear. But as they looked at each other, the faintest glimmer of determination shone in their eyes. This was only the beginning, and the story was far from over. The words hung in the air between them, both hopeful and uncertain. They sat there in silence for a long time, the kind of silence that isn't awkward but heavy with unspoken thoughts. The horizon seemed endless, mirroring the uncertainty of their future. Finally, one of them reached out and took the other's hand, a small, quiet gesture, but one that said, "I'm willing to try." The days that followed weren't easy. They had decided to work things out, but the obstacles didn't magically disappear. Their families still had concerns. Their differing life goals still loomed large, and the question of the overseas job offer remained unanswered. But for the first time, they decided to face these challenges together, instead of letting them pull them apart. They started by setting boundaries with their families, an emotionally draining but necessary step. They didn't have all the answers, but they made it clear they were committed to figuring things out on their own terms. Some family members softened, while others remained skeptical, but at least the tension eased enough to let them breathe. One evening, as they were sorting through old photos and reminiscing about their childhood, they stumbled across a picture of themselves on the playground. It was taken the day they'd made their pact to marry, both of them grinning with missing teeth and dirt-smudged faces. It was a reminder of how simple things had once been, and how far they'd come since then. "We had no idea what we were signing up for," one of them joked, and they both laughed. But the photo also became a symbol of what they were trying to hold on to, not the innocence of childhood, but the sincerity and joy that had always defined their bond. They started to find a rhythm. They learned how to communicate better, how to fight fair without tearing each other down, and how to support one another without losing sight of their individual dreams. It wasn't perfect, and there were days when the doubts crept back in. But they kept choosing each other, one day at a time. The overseas job offer was still unresolved, and it became the elephant in the room. Finally, after weeks of avoiding the topic, they decided to sit down and talk about it. "If you take it, I'll support you," one of them said, their voice steady but tinged with sadness. "But if you stay, it has to be because you want to, not because you feel like you have to." It was a difficult conversation, filled with raw honesty and vulnerability. In the end, they decided to approach it not as a problem to solve, but as an opportunity to grow. They explored the possibility of a long-distance relationship, knowing it would be hard but not impossible if they both committed to making it work. For the first time, the decision felt like theirs, not something dictated by circumstance or other people's opinions. Meanwhile, the other subplots in their lives began to find resolution. The skeptical sibling who had been struggling with their own relationship issues finally opened up about their fears and insecurities. Watching the couple navigate their challenges inspired them to take a chance on their own happiness, and they started to repair their relationship with a partner they'd almost given up on. Similarly, the close friend who had warned them against chasing a fairy tale admitted they'd been wrong. "I still think this isn't easy," they said one day over coffee, "but I can see how much you two care about each other. And that's rare. Don't let it go." As the months passed, they started to realize that the love they shared wasn't about recreating their childhood promise. It was about building something new, something real and imperfect, but deeply meaningful. They learned to embrace the differences that had once felt so daunting. The planner found joy in the spontaneity of the artist, and the artist discovered the beauty of structure and stability. They grew together, each becoming better because of the other. The family dinner that had once ended in disaster became a turning point. Over time, the family members who had been most resistant began to see how serious and committed they were. It didn't happen overnight. But slowly, walls came down, and conversations replaced conflict. There were still moments of tension, but those moments were met with patience and understanding instead of anger. The decision about the overseas job finally came to a head when the deadline to accept the offer arrived. After a long, tearful conversation, they decided to take the leap. "This isn't goodbye," they said as they hugged at the airport, both of them trying to hold back tears. "It's just another chapter." The months that followed were hard, filled with late-night video calls and endless texts. But the distance, instead of driving them apart, brought them closer. They learned to appreciate each other in new ways and found strength in their shared commitment. When they finally reunited, it was as if no time had passed. The challenges they'd faced apart had only made them more certain of their bond. They decided to move forward together, not because of a childhood promise, but because they chose each other every day. Despite the hardships, in the end, their story wasn't about fulfilling a pact or living out a fairy tale. It was about growing up, facing challenges, and realizing that love is less about grand gestures and more about showing up, even when it's hard. Their journey taught them, and everyone around them, that the strongest relationships are built on mutual respect, open communication, and an unwavering willingness to try. As they stood together, looking at the same playground where it all began, they realized they'd come full circle. But this time, the promises they made weren't born from childhood innocence. They were rooted in the understanding of who they were and who they wanted to become. And that, they knew, was the foundation of something truly lasting.